Hello everyone and welcome back to the EL111 coursebook. In this video we're going to be going over the last part of Unit 2, Unit 2C. We have a very interesting, subject today. Can we travel through time? So let's take a look at these pictures here before we move forward. I want you to take a second to guess what is going on in each of these pictures. Ask yourselves questions like, what is this? Where can it be used? Have you seen this before? Is it of this time period? Take a second and then we'll continue the video as if you've done those things. On first thought, when looking at this picture, what I personally see is furniture, perhaps a living room, but it seems very old school, like it's not from this time period. I mean, just look at the TV. This is something straight out of the 60s, for example. It's just a very different aesthetic to what we're used to nowadays. And this looks like some sort of black hole universe system, something. Could also indicate to time travel, perhaps. Again, not really sure, but it does look like it's a black hole or traveling through space or time. For the third one, if I had to guess, this one is a lot more old school, so it's probably in, I don't know, this looks like what, 16th, 15th century or something like that. Looks very old. So yeah, that's what I get from this picture. Let's take a look at exercise 1. We're going to watch a slideshow called Can We Travel Through Time? Look at the photos. Okay. So we have a video that we're going to watch, and the video is probably going to answer our questions for these pictures, and it's called Can We Travel Through Time? So let's open the video. Here we go. It's a 10-minute video, so it's quite long, so I want you to enjoy the experience, but some things to look out for. Try to guess, like we said, what the pictures meant and see if you got them correctly or not. Try to go through each phase here one by one and try to make some notes about these, okay? So I'll play the video and then we'll talk about it once it's done, okay? Here we go.
It's morning. You wake up in your bed, open the curtains, and look out onto the street. You do the same thing every day. But today, something is very different. The cars look strange, and some of the buildings are different. And the people are wearing funny clothes. You go into the living room, and everything looks odd here too. The furniture is very old-fashioned. And the carpet is interesting. You switch on this vintage TV and see the news. It says it's 1964. It seems you have travelled back in time. Oh my goodness. Where will you go? What will you do? Who will you look for? What news will you give the people of the past? With all the questions it poses and the situations it presents, time travel makes the perfect device for science fiction films, TV programs, and books. You might think people have been fantasizing about time travel for centuries. Actually, the first account of time travel that really excited the public was in 1895 with The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. It's no coincidence that this was around the time that Albert Einstein and others were starting to reach a greater understanding of time itself. First, let's clarify what we mean by time. It's funny, isn't it? We talk about time a lot. All the time, in fact. But how often do you stop and think about what time is? It's not as easy as you might think. In fact, 2,000 years ago, Aristotle described time as the most unknown of all unknown things. But over time, there it is again. Many people have attempted to define the concept. There are dictionary definitions, like the dimension of the physical universe that orders the sequence of events at a given place. And there are also more light-hearted definitions. For example, one physicist described time as nature's way of stopping everything happening at once. But for our current purposes, let's just remind ourselves that time can be described as a dimension. The fourth dimension, in fact. A good way to illustrate this is by imagining two planes in the sky and thinking about how they might crash. Now, in order for this to happen, they would need to have all the same three-dimensional coordinates. That is, left and right, up and down, and forwards and backwards. If all three sets of coordinates were the same, the planes would be in exactly the same place, right? Well, not if one plane was there 2 minutes before the other one. In order to be certain that the two planes crash, we need to know they are both at that specific point in space at the same time. In that sense, time is the fourth dimension of something we call space-time. So, what has all this got to do with time travel? Well, if we picture space-time as a four-dimensional piece of fabric, then anything very heavy, the Earth, for example, will cause the space-time to bend. This bending, or curvature, of space around the Earth is what we call gravity. But it also affects time. And this is one way in which we could, potentially, travel through time, because time effectively moves slower, closer to Earth, and faster, further away from Earth. This is called time dilation. Imagine there were two twins and one lived at the top of a very high mountain and the other twin lived at the bottom. Because of time dilation, time would actually move very slightly faster for the first twin, and therefore she would be older than her twin at the bottom of the mountain. Okay, we're talking billionths of a second difference here. But imagine the first twin wasn't at the top of a mountain, but instead she was in a spaceship millions of miles above the Earth. In theory, after travelling in the spaceship for 20 years, when she came back to Earth, she would be noticeably older than her twin. But it's not only proximity to Earth that can affect time. Speed can also make time move faster. Did you know that time goes more slowly for someone on a speeding train than for another observer on the platform? Again, it's not much slower. At train speeds, it only makes billionths of a second difference. However, if someone was on a train, or again, a spaceship, that travelled at almost the speed of light, in theory, time travel might be possible. A year for the passenger of the superfast train would occur at the same time that 200 years passed at the platform. So, when he returned, the Earth would be a very different place. So, are we saying time travel is possible? Professor Stephen Hawking recently said he used to feel like a crank talking about time travel, but these days it is being discussed as a serious topic in the scientific community. Most experts agree that travelling back to a time before now will be impossible. In fact, they maintain that people will only ever be able to travel back to a time when a time machine was invented. So, unfortunately, you won't be able to choose a point in history and go back to see it with your own eyes. But because of the strange nature of time already discussed, many believe travelling forwards in time could be possible one day. However, as we have learned, it would probably involve spaceships flying much, much faster than anything we have invented so far. And at those sort of speeds, no human would survive. Clearly, it will be extremely expensive and require engineering skills we simply don't have currently. But since time travel might just be possible in the future, let's look at it from another angle. So far, we have looked at time travel from a physicist's point of view, but there are also many questions posed by philosophy. It's time for another thought experiment. Imagine a young time traveller is very angry with his grandfather because of the way the old man has lived his life. So the time traveller decides to go back in time to when his grandfather was young and shoot him. He buys a gun and practices his aim every day until he is a top marksman. He then travels back in time, finds his grandfather, aims the gun at him and pulls the trigger. What happens? If he kills his grandfather, then his father will never be born, and nor will he. And if he is never born, how is any of this happening? This is called the grandfather paradox. Some philosophers claim it would be impossible for the man to shoot his grandfather. The gun would jam, the bullets would miss, or perhaps a strong gust of wind would blow the gun out of the young man's hand. In any event, nature would intervene and prevent it from happening. And while the grandfather paradox is an extreme example, it does pose questions about what we could actually do if we were to travel in time. Natural law may prevent us from doing anything that would change history in any way, which doesn't leave much. Perhaps it isn't helpful to think so much about time travel in a way it's shown in science fiction films. Maybe it's better to appreciate time in the way we experience it every day, rather than fantasizing about living in the past or the future. We could simply look around and marvel at what is happening right now, in the present. And if you really want to experience a bit of time travel, simply look up at the sky at night and gaze at the stars. Because these stars are so far away, the image you see is not from now, but from many years ago. So, in a sense, every time you look up into the night sky, you are looking into the past.
Okay, that was a very interesting video. I did not expect it to be this detailed. I mean, it was 10 minutes, so it makes sense. Um, Here we have a few questions, and what I would like us to do now is I'm going to say each question, and I would like you to pause the video and talk about it with yourselves, or if you're in pairs with your friends. Based on the slideshow in the video, what stories about time travel do you know? Do you believe that time travel is possible? Would you prefer to travel into the past or the future? Which year would you most like to visit and why? What would you like to see? And who would you like to meet? So I'm going to say these questions again. Hopefully you've answered them and you have your own answers. I'll do my own answers as well, and then we can compare. Again, there's no right or wrong. This is simply for discussion. So what stories about time travel do you know? I don't know much about time travel, but I do watch a lot of science fiction, whether it be animated or live action, about time travel. And let me tell you, time travel makes for great science fiction movies. If you've watched the Avengers Endgame, it's a great movie and it has time travel in it. So it fits well into the story. A little confusing at times, but I think they make it a little more confusing on purpose so that you don't question what is really going on. Do you believe that time travel is possible? I would say yes. I mean, if you go back 200 years, flying wasn't a thing, and I'm pretty sure if you ask people at that time that just a couple centuries from now, we'd be able to fly and have goods flying from country to country and being able to move or hop around from continent to continent in the span of a few hours, they'd probably call you insane. So I think nothing is really far fetched anymore, to be completely honest with you. So I do believe time travel will be possible. Maybe not now, simply because we don't have the engineering or technology yet. Focus on the word yet. But I do see it perhaps happening in the next 400 to 500 years or so, which is a long time. I mean, I won't be here to see it, but hey, I would say it is possible. Would you prefer to travel into the past or the future? Um, I would I would enjoy the future more, I feel like. I mean, we've we have documents about the past, and although obviously just glimpses and not all of it, I feel like the future just has that uncertainty to it, which is unique in its own way. I mean, if you travel fast forward into the future like 300 years, what does the world look like? Is it more advanced? Are we living as well as we do now? Or did World War III, World War IV happen and now the planet is set back thousands of years again? It's a very interesting concept and no one can really answer it because no one has experienced the future. You see the intensity of what's going on, that's time for you. So for me, it would be the future. Which year would you most like to visit? Probably 2300. So quite a bit into the future. Just to see what the world is like, how the planet has changed, countries, positions of power, money, economies, all of that. So it would be very interesting to visit the year 2300, see what that's like. Why? We just mentioned that. What would you like to see? Again, different places, different countries, the way people interact. I mean, the way we interact nowadays with the internet and social media is very different to just 20 or 30 years ago. So imagine if you make that far of a jump, what would it be like? Who would you like to meet? Uh, Probably celebrities, artists, people in power, if I could, just to see what they're like and how things have changed as well. It's very interesting because you have nothing to compare it to from the past, so it'd be very interesting. Are they half human, half robots, perhaps? I don't know, and I don't think I will ever know, but that's the beauty of it. Beauty of the unknown, I guess. All right. Imagine you have just arrived, question number five. Imagine you have just arrived back at home in the present day after going on a time travel adventure. Make notes. Okay, so if this was a hypothetical situation, so I want you to think hypothetically, which is not real and nothing is really off limits. So you just went to school on a time travel adventure and you got back home at the end of the day. um, Here are some questions, and I want you to pause the video and think about these and actually answer these questions as if you were in that hypothetical situation. Again, it's a good way to discuss different answers and how we go about this. So, if I went on a time travel adventure personally, I'd probably go to the past. I mean, I know I said in the previous one that I'd go to the future, but if it's just an adventure, I'd also like to visit the past at some point. Um, so where did you go? Probably like 60, no, not 60, like maybe 200 years ago, like 200 years into the past. Why? Probably to meet like my great grandfather or those kinds of people. I feel like it'd be a very different time, different ways of thinking, different mindsets. It's just very different people. I'm always, I always laugh a little bit inside when people are like, I'm making my ancestors proud. And he's talking about, or they're talking about ancestors from like hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. These same ancestors would be very different people, pretty much strangers because of the time period that they lived in. So I don't think they would even comprehend half of the stuff you as a person is saying. So yeah, take that how you will. So I would say, yeah, go into the past to meet some of my older family members that are no longer alive and yeah, haven't been alive for a very long time. How did you travel? I mean, time machine, perhaps. If we want to be more specific, then maybe a spaceship at the speed of light. If we, I mean, it's a hypothetical situation, so probably we do have the engineering and the capability to have humans survive that kind of speed. What was different in the past, future, and what did you do? If I had to note things that were different in the past, probably the lack of the internet, social media, phones, just the easy access communication that we take for granted every day. I mean, if you can't talk to someone, then you can't talk to someone until you meet them some other time. You're not just readily available. That could be a positive and a negative depending on how you look at it. Also, just life. I feel like life was simpler back then. Um, so that was probably different as well. What did you do? Like I said, probably just took life for what it is, laid down the screens for a while as there were physically uh, not that many screens as we do today. There were no monitors, no phones, no internet, none of that. So, and then obviously meet people of the past, ask them questions, meet very old family members. What are their plans and aspirations? It's nice to get a perspective on that sort of thing. What impact did your actions have? Well, considering I didn't kill anyone, hopefully, I think my impact would probably not do anything. I mean, I'm not trying to convince my ancestors to stop having kids or I end up killing my great grandfather. That way, I start the paradox and then I'm not alive and then it doesn't make sense. So I I don't think my actions would really have an impact. Do let me know if your answers are more or less the same, and if yours are different, definitely write them down below because it's a very interesting topic for sure. All right, now let's take a look at writing exciting stories. This will be related to Unit 2B, if you guys remember, and I'll tell you why in a second. Remember the narrative mountain right here, which is the one we talked about before. Just give me a second. This one right here. So when structuring a narrative or when writing a story in general, you want to keep in mind these six different stages. Remember, we talked about setting the scene and then introducing your characters. This is sort of your introduction. And then rising action and then your climax. And then after the climax, things go back down slowly and finally you conclude. So always keep this in mind. Take a picture or a screenshot of this. It helps you with your writing as well, even when simply practicing. So let's go back to Unit 1C. Remember the narrative mountain. A good story has a beginning, like we said, setting the scene and introducing your characters, a middle, and finally an end. So describe what you heard, saw, smelled, and felt. These are feelings, things that happened to you, and your way of describing them will either engage the reader or disengage. So what you heard, what you saw, what you smelled, if it was a cafe and it had those delicious coffee smells, for example, and things that you felt, perhaps a touch or the cold breeze, things like that. Okay. You could use be plus feeling plus adjective to describe your emotions. Basically, it's a way to describe your emotions. And also, when it comes to writing stories, have lots of details. Lack of details is certainly something that will leave the readers either confused or wanting more. I think having people want more is a skill, but if you do it too often, it loses its touch. So definitely include details and get to the bottom of whatever you're trying to express so that people relate to it more. Again, I like to compare it a lot to movies and TV shows. I mean, if you don't include the small stuff that people appreciate, which is the small details, perhaps a dirty lens to display that the environment was indeed dirty, or after a nuclear bomb or something like that. Uh, these are small details that matter a lot, and they matter just the same when writing your own stories as well. link your account together with words and phrases. So again, this is just linking between your words and phrases. Things like so, because, but, and as a result. So as a result of something happening. Again, these are phrases that you could use to combine your words and your ideas together. All right. So now that we've talked about writing stories and we've had a good idea, and I've also told you to write something in the previous video, we're going to do one more here. And you're going to write a story about a time travel adventure, which I think is a lot of fun because I feel like just time travel is such a unique topic because there's endless possibilities. You could go to the moon and back with time travel, and you'd still have a lot to write about. So, plan your story, first of all. Uh, Check the narrative mountain that we talked about. Set your scene and think of the characters, draft the characters that you're going to be using. We'll skip this part. And I would say just write them. Just make sure that you're following the narrative mountain. Finish your story, and after you finish it, perhaps publish it on social media or even show it to a friend or family member and let them be the judge of how well you did. If they found it engaging, if they found it very detail oriented and something that they really enjoyed, then you did an awesome job. If they felt that it was perhaps lacking a little bit of detail or things were a little confusing, maybe you added some characters that you didn't introduce before without artistically explaining who they are or why they weren't introduced, then I think you should probably go back and write a new one, or not even write a new one, just fix the things that you feel were a little out of touch. Okay? So that was it from me. I hope you guys had a good time. I hope you enjoyed the video, the concept, and I hope you learned something new. This is it from me. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.